Good morning, Minister. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Let's just talk about this month of June and this environmental month. I know it's a loaded question, but what are you hoping to achieve out of this month?
Well, Gareth, I like to say that every day is Environment Day, and every day we need to increase awareness amongst citizens about three major threats that face humanity. The first, as you say, is climate change, the second is environmental degradation, and the third is pollution. And essentially what we are trying to encourage everybody to do is to reset our relationship with nature. Nature provides very important ecosystem services that sustain all life on Earth. So a simple example of an ecosystem service: fresh water, grazing, fishing. Those are three major sources of economic activity in our country, and without those things we won't have livelihoods, we won't have food security, and indeed we won't have life itself. Now, the United Nations has declared this year as, this decade as the decade of ecosystem restoration. And I think what it's saying is that the current way in which human beings are living with nature is placing such a burden on the environment that very soon it won't be able to sustain us. So we've got to re-examine the way in which we produce energy. We've got to re-examine the way in which we have development, and of course we've got to look at ways in which we can help the earth to sustain ourselves.
Minister, I'm sure many people, I would imagine you may have watched it, I certainly have a few times, the documentary by David Attenborough, The Year the World Changed. I think it highlighted very, very nicely the kind of impact that humanity and the human species has on the environment and how much it changed just in the last year. So I want to ask about Tourism Month, but two issues, or two questions, if you could. One is, obviously, having a year of lockdown has done wonders for conservation as far as many of these areas like grassland areas, freshwater areas, almost going back in time to at least a better condition. How do we try and sustain that? And then the second question I have is on ecotourism. Of course, there's people who need to do these jobs, don't they? And many of them have lost their livelihoods, they've lost their incomes. Many lodges and such have had to even close down. Talk to me about the impact of COVID as we now into a year later of Conservation Month.
Well, I think that you've put it very well. What we have to balance is the sustainability of our existence with the sustainability of the environment. And our Constitution allows us to have a concept which is called sustainable use. And what that means is that the way in which we produce and consume now should not be undermining the ability of future generations to consume and use. Of course, an important development in recent times has been the Climate Commission, which is looking at how we develop pathways to achieve a low energy, low carbon society in the future. We understand that most of our energy generation in this country is from coal, and the burning of fossil fuels contributes to climate change. So we have to be involved in a society in our fair share contribution to reducing carbon gas emissions. With regard to the tourism sector, one of the major impacts on conservation in Southern Africa has been the fact that international tourism has dried up. International tourism is a very important revenue source for all conservation agencies in Southern Africa, including our own sandparks, which for the first time in many years has had to request Treasury to table a deficit budget. And that's because tourists, international tourists that are very important for our revenue stream, are not coming to our protected areas. We have tried to reallocate budgets. We have tried to increase through the presidential job stimulus program. We've tried to increase work opportunities in these areas, but you're absolutely correct that the lockdown has also generated enormous hardship for people across our country, and particularly for people living in rural areas.
And we're going to be focusing on many of those issues as we get through the month of June. Minister Barbara Creecy, thank you very much. Always a pleasure speaking all things environmental with you.